So hello and welcome everyone. Good to see so many people here. And I do see a few familiar names from previous webinars, so it's lovely to see you back. So just before we start, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I'm getting some yeses and okays. That's good. Excellent. That's good to know. Okay, so I can see that I think most people are into the room now. Oh, maybe a few more coming in. Oh no, it's just suddenly a big jump in numbers. Very nice to be here again. Okay, so I'm going to start properly. My name, as some of you know, and it's on the slide, is Rachael Roberts. I'm a teacher trainer, and materials writer, and I'm part of the team who has written Pearson's new upper secondary series, High Note. I'll be showing you some examples from that during the webinar. I'm also a qualified life coach specialising in working with teachers and other educational professionals. And this is the 5th in the series of career skills that we have been doing. Last time we looked at leadership skills, and today we're going to be looking at teamwork skills. And whether you were in attendance at these last webinars or not, you are going to be able to watch them, and I will give you a link at the end of the webinar where you can find the recordings of the other webinars and also this one. Okay, so now a little bit of housekeeping. We had some problems earlier with the connection. Because there are so many more people going online because of the current circumstances with COVID-19, it's causing some problems. So I'm going to turn off the camera and just keep audio because I think we are less likely to have problems. So do not be surprised if you can't see me in a minute. Nothing has gone wrong, but so long as you can hear me, that's the main thing. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the camera now. Okay, so can you still hear me? Although I know you can't see me. Okay, so yes, excellent. All right, so a little bit more housekeeping. So we're going to be sending out a recording to the slides. A recording of the slides and also your certificate to everybody who has registered and attended, and this will be happening within the next 2 weeks, but probably a little bit sooner than that. And I'm just waiting for the slides to catch up, which they're not. So let's see what happens. I may have to do this without the slides if it continues like this. Okay, but at least you can hear me. That's the main thing. All right, so we're going to be talking about teamwork. And, teamwork is something that we hear a lot about. There are often lots of... can you see the slides now? It's just come up for me. Right. You won't be able to see me, Irena. I've turned off my camera. Right. Okay, can you see the slides? No, no slides, not yet. Okay. All right, just give me a second then. I'm just trying to sort out this. You can hear me typing now to the Pearson. Pearson. Okay, so you can see the slides now, right? Okay. Yes, yeah, there are just too many people on the internet. This is what's causing these problems. And this is why I have turned off my camera. So if you can't see me, that is to be expected because I've turned it off. But you should hopefully be able to see the slides. Okay, all right, so let's start then. So I'm going to be talking about career skills, and I'm going to be talking specifically in this last of the 5 webinars about teamwork skills. Okay, so here are a couple of examples of memes which you will find on the internet about teamwork. So, for example, teamwork makes the dream work. Or individually we are just one drop, but together we are an ocean. Can you think of any other well-known memes about teamwork? If you can, just pop them in the chat box. Another one that I can think of is there is no I in team. Okay, so any other suggestions? Yes, okay, together everyone achieves more. One for all and all for one. Excellent suggestions, yes. So we can see that, you know, these kinds of things, we see them on the internet all the time. They're very inspiring. Many hands make light work. Yes, that's quite an old one. 2 heads are better than none. Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. Together we're stronger. Okay, excellent. Right. So these are very sort of motivating and inspiring. However, unfortunately, good teamwork is not as easy as an inspiring quote or two. There's quite a lot to it. And more often than not, people working in groups are more like this picture, which is not yet coming up, but this picture of bumper cars or dodgems. So everybody is trying to get somewhere, but they're getting stuck, they're bumping into each other, and they're not working as a cohesive team. And that is because there really is a big difference between being a group and being a team. So if you can hear me, what do you think is the difference between a group and a team? How would you say there was a difference? Let me just give you a minute to put something in the chat box. Okay, team is organized, says Ivona. Right. Joseph says individuals. I assume that means a group. Team has a purpose, an aim, united by a common goal. There's cooperation. A team is more organized. Yes, I think those are all excellent suggestions. I would agree with that. So yes, the difference, as I see it, is that a team, right, has to have a shared purpose. So it's not just a set of individual purposes. They have a shared purpose, and the team members are committed to that shared purpose and to each other. So yes, team has a goal, says Anya. So they have to, you know, they share the outcome. If it's a failure, they all fail. If it's a success, they're all a success. And we have to teach people how to be part of a team and how to work in a team effectively. So what are these teamwork skills then? And, you know, we'll look at what they are and then perhaps at how we can teach them. So what would you say were some of the key teamwork skills? Just give you a chance to put them in the chat box. So responsibility, sharing ideas, cooperation, compromise, that's a good one. Empathy, good communication. Yeah, no, I like all of these. Flexibility, cooperation, values, synergy, responsibility. Yes, there's a big lag on the slide, so I'm just kind of going to carry on and try and tell you what's on the slides, I think. Okay, so my list of teamwork skills. This is a slide which may or may not come up in a moment, but what I have on my list, it's come up for me now, is my list of teamwork skills: collaborating, contributing, encouraging, helping, listening, negotiating, managing conflict, planning, problem solving, and sharing ideas. But I think you've also mentioned some other aspects which I would add. I mean, I can see patience there, for example, which I think is a good example as well. Now, some of these skills we've looked at in previous webinars. So, you know, we talked about problem solving and decision making. We also talked about planning, but many of these are very sort of interactive skills, interpersonal skills, if you like. And these are the kinds of things that I think we have to help our students to develop. So why are these teamwork skills so important? Well, I think part of the reason that they're important is the fact that we can use them to help our students, obviously, to do better in their future careers, but we can also use them now. So learning to work in a team can really help our students both now and in the future. So one of the ways in which I think it can help students is in building confidence. So learning to work in a team can help the students to discover what they're capable of and help them to learn from each other. You know, by definition, teamwork is much less teacher-led. So we're also allowing them to become much more autonomous. I think another advantage of teaching them teamwork skills is that being responsible to other members of a team will also help them to develop resilience and grit, because they need to commit to doing whatever's necessary so as not to let down other team members. And equally, I think they need to learn that sometimes it's necessary to put their own needs or their own way of working to one side in order to achieve a shared goal. So this is why we should teach these team working skills to our students. So let's have a think about, you know, why team working skills are one of the most valued career skills by employers. Obviously, a good team member is, as we've seen, has all these qualities. They're flexible, they're supportive, they get on well with others, and ultimately this is going to lead to good results for the company. Okay, yeah, I'm aware that we're having some issues here. As you know, the internet is completely overloaded. So there is no video of me. I've turned it off because I think that will help, but I'm also aware that we're having some issues in getting the slides to load as well. So I'm trying to basically do as much as I can just through voice alone. All right, and I hope you understand that we're doing the best we can. Okay, so this is an example. I think most of you probably can see this slide now. This is an example of some typical questions which are often asked in job interviews. So I just said that employers are really looking for evidence of team working skills. And these are the kinds of questions that they will come across when they are in job interviews, and indeed in university interviews as well. So this is the kind of thing they might ask because they're looking for evidence of team working skills. So I think it's well worth discussing these kinds of questions in class. So in case anybody can't see the slides, some of these typical questions are things like, tell us about a time when you worked in a team to achieve an objective, or tell us about a time when you worked in a team to solve a problem, or tell us about a time when your contribution made a big difference to a team's success. So discussing these kinds of questions in class can help students, I think, to prepare for interviews and to have like these anecdotes, if you like, of how they have exactly worked in teams. And this is something, you know, which employers, as we've said, are very much looking for. And it's not just about saying, oh, yes, I'm a really good team worker. It's about being able to give specific examples of how you've helped people work in your team. So I have a slide here, which I think most of you can't see, right? But it's the difference between I helped my team to beat competing groups by encouraging everyone to speak up and contribute their ideas in meetings. I also supported those who were struggling to meet their commitments by offering to take on some of their tasks. So that's one way of talking about your contribution to a team. The other one here is I led my team to victory by personally beating all previous sales records. So which of these do you think would impress a potential employer more? Okay, yeah, so most of you are saying slide 1, right? I would agree, right? And the reason for this is because they are giving specific examples of how they work well in a team. Now, the second one might be personally quite impressive. It might show you know, that you're quite good at what you do, but it doesn't show that you work well in a team. As Analia says, the second seems selfish. Yes, it just doesn't give us any evidence of you being a good team worker. It maybe gives you evidence of being a good salesperson, but that's not the same thing. Okay, so how can we help our students then to develop these teamwork skills? So I think the first thing is we can consciously focus on helping them to bond as a group. So lots of teachers, in fact, I would say probably all teachers begin working with a group. They usually use icebreakers. Okay, so by icebreakers, I mean those kinds of activities where students get to know a little bit about each other. Probably the most famous icebreaker activity is Find Someone Who, which dates back to at least 1983, if not before. It was in a book called Keep Talking, and students have a list of sentences such as find someone who has 6 cats, and they have to go around and talk to everybody in the class and find out who these sentences describe. So the teacher can pre-prepare them, or you can do it more randomly and just find out who has a cat. Somebody probably has. Or you can get the students to write the sentences, and they can look for things that they're interested in, like find someone who does karate, for example. Maybe they also do karate and they want to find someone with a common interest. You don't have to mingle the students if you want them to stay seated. A very simple but effective activity is to ask them to find 3 things they have in common with their neighbour. Things that they can't immediately see, so they don't just say things like, we've both got brown hair. Or if you have a bit more time, maybe you could ask students to write down a number of questions that they would like to be asked about their life and interests. They then swap the questions with the neighbour and carry out an interview with each other. And this has the advantage of that students can avoid touchy subjects and they can choose what they want to talk about. And I think there's no reason why these kinds of activities have to only be used at the start of a course. I think we can and should be using them all the way through our courses, because each opportunity to find out more about each other, to find out what we've got in common, is an opportunity for the students to bond and to trust each other more. And that is going to help with them developing a sense of themselves as a team, not just as a group of individuals. But as I said, I think we do have to be a bit sensitive, particularly with teenagers, about pushing them to reveal things about themselves that they might not want to. So this is an example of how we can give them some choice in this. So this is a listening and vocabulary lesson from High Note, which is the book I mentioned at the beginning. And this is level 4. And the lesson is about talking about iconic photographs that have some kind of significance or meaning behind them. And in the final activity, the students are then asked to personalize this by showing each other some of the favorite photos that they have on their phones. And they talk about these photos in a similar way to these iconic photos. So who is in the photo? What does the photo mean to you? What does it capture? What had just happened before it was taken? But the students can choose which photos they share. So therefore, they are able to only share something that they're willing to talk about. So it's quite important, I think, when we talk about bonding and trust, that we give students these choices and that we don't kind of force them to talk about things before they're ready to do so. In addition to teaching students, getting students to share more and to tell each other more about themselves, we can also encourage them to see themselves as part of a unit, if you like, to see the class as one thing, as a cohesive group. So this is an activity which comes from Jill Hadfield's book, Classroom Dynamics. And it's called Group History. And what happens in this activity is that you get students to find out about the history of the whole group. So that means not just since they started learning English together, but from when they were born. So let's say that I don't know what year they would have been born. Let's say they were born in 2003. Right, so one student interviews everybody about what happened in 2003, another one about what happened in 2004, and they build up a little story about the group in that year. So for example, while Piotr was living in England, Magda was just learning to ride a bike, and this helps them to see themselves as a cohesive group. Class surveys can do the same thing. Or another nice activity, particularly towards the end of the year, is to get students to write about themselves as a group and kind of sell their group to the next teacher. Why are they such a lovely group to teach? What are their strengths? Try and sort of create an advert for their group. So all of these things are kind of going to help them to bond. And of course, we can also directly teach them how to form social bonds and give them the language to do so. So in a moment, hopefully you're going to see an example from High Note 4, which is actually a vocabulary lesson. But the topic of the lesson is about how to sort of break the ice at social events when you don't quite know, what to say to people. So the text is how to break the ice and make new friends, but we're also teaching vocabulary and idioms and phrases related to communication. So we've looked at kind of how we can help students to bond together more, to trust each other, and now we're going to have a little look at how we can help students to learn a little bit more about themselves and about how they work within a team. So in the last webinar on leadership, we looked at how they can understand themselves better and know what qualities they have. But here we're going to be looking at different kind of roles within a team. Now, there are lots of different ways of describing these roles, but I've come up here with a list of sort of typical roles, if you like, within a team, which I'm hoping will come up in a moment, but if not, then I will read it out to you. Okay. Right, so we've got the next slide. So this is a good place to start, I think, if we're talking about students understanding the roles they take in a team. This again comes from Classroom Dynamics, and there are some questions for them to consider. So in your life up until now, what groups have you been a member of? So these kind of groups, it might be your class, but it could be your family, it could be a group of friends, it could be scouts or your swimming team. All right, so think about all the groups that you've been a member of. Think about, did you have a good, bad or mixed experience as a member of these groups? And then get them to think about the good groups, you know, the groups they enjoyed being in. What did those groups have in common? So we're starting to get them to tease out what makes a good group or indeed a good team. What do you think these groups gave you, and what did you give back? And what did you have to give up? Because as we said earlier, if you're going to be part of a team, you may not necessarily always have things the way that you personally want them. You might have to make sacrifices. And then think about the group that you're in now. You know, what do you think they will be able to give you? What can you offer to them? And what might you have to give up in order to make that group work well? So as Elsa says, respect and tolerance are important. All right, absolutely. Okay, so this is a good way to start with thinking about the different elements of being in a group, the different roles. And here I have a list of some typical roles that we might have within a group. So hopefully it will appear in a second. Yes, Alicia, I don't have my video turned on, so you won't see me. If anybody's wondering why you can't see me, I've done that in order to try to improve the quality of the sound and the slides, because the internet is struggling a lot today because so many people are online. Okay, so this slide hasn't come up yet. Hopefully it will while I'm talking. So some different roles that people have within groups. So being cooperative, so being willing to adapt for the good of the overall goal. Being dominating, trying to take over control of the group. Hurrying people up, pushing the group to move on. Maybe pushing the group to move on before the task is done. Clarifier, so making things clearer by summarizing and focusing. Risk taker. All right, so these are some of the roles that people might play within the group. I'm hoping that the slide's going to come up in a second, all right, but in case it doesn't, all right, I would say that some of these roles make a positive contribution to the group. Some of them make more of a negative contribution to the group. So what kinds of things might people do within a group that would be a negative contribution? Can you just put some of your ideas into the chat box? So what could people do that would be a negative contribution to the group? Okay, disagreeing, possibly. Is that, when does that become a negative though? All right, so yeah, negative comments. Okay, I would agree with that. All right, dominating. Okay, so maybe some people can see this because they're commenting on it. All right, rushing others, complaining, criticizing. All right. Okay, so the things that I have listed as being negative, yes, so dominating, trying to take over control of the group, all right, is really not very helpful. Also, the opposite of that, all right, so if you are not taking any part in the group, all right, and you are, you know, being what I've called the tortoise here. I think some people can see these slides because they're referring to them, so that's great. Great, okay, I can see it now, so hopefully most people can. So the ones on the right are the roles which are not helpful. So, you know, trying to take over control of the group, pushing the group to move on before the task is done. The tortoise who just doesn't take an active role. The cynic, you know, criticizing or laughing at others' ideas. I saw somebody mention that earlier. And then the blocker, you know, that person who has a reason why every suggestion won't work. So these are some of the negative roles that people might take within a group. And then on the left, we have some of the positive roles that people can play within a group. You know, the person who is cooperative, the person who, you know, clarifies things or is willing to take risks or uses humour in a positive way. Now, obviously, these are roles, not people. You know, so one person may take several different roles, some positive, maybe some negative. But people do tend to have kind of favourite roles, if you like. You know, some people will tend to often dominate or tend to often be the person who motivates. And so it's good to get people to really think about the roles that they typically take within a group. And so doing this kind of activity where you get students to look at different roles and to decide which are positive and which perhaps are not helpful is a good way of raising awareness of that, because people you don't have to tell them that they are normally, you know, dominating or normally the tortoise. They will hopefully start to become aware of it themselves. You can also, I think, help students to become aware of how they work within the group by getting one person in the group to become an observer. So when the group is working together, one person doesn't take part in the discussion, but instead they observe and take notes. So one of the things that they can do, this observer, is they can actually physically draw the interaction between the members of the group. Right, so that's what's represented on the left-hand side of the slide here. So they draw a line every time two people communicate within the group. Now, the good thing about this is that very often when people are aware that they're being observed, they will change their behaviour. And so the person who tends to not contribute much probably will contribute more. And the person who tends to contribute too much will probably do a bit less, because they know that the observer is mapping the interaction. You can also get the observer to take notes on the different roles that they observe within the group. I would suggest not saying who is, you know, being a blocker or dominating or even being a motivator, but just noting that that is happening. Right? So Matilda says the point is how to do that. I'm not quite sure what that you mean, Matilda, but I think in terms of encouraging participation, I think having an observer within the group actually observing and feeding back on the participation is a good way to do that. I would suggest that that helps to raise awareness. Okay, so once you have more awareness of how students work within a group, then you can also perhaps teach them some of the language that they need in order to carry out some of these tasks within a group. Because sometimes students don't participate well in groups because they don't feel very confident about what to say. So we said that one of the key roles within teamwork is to clarify. Right? So let's teach them the language that they need in order to clarify and to participate effectively in a conversation. So here we have some, different examples. This is from High Note 3. So we've got some phrases here for clarifying, for checking others understand, checking when someone is speaking, right, confirming that you understand. To give you another example, hopefully, oh yeah, this is working. Okay, so here, this is from High Note 4, and this is some language for giving instructions, which again is something that you often need to do when you're working within a group, is to actually explain to the other people in the group how to do something. Or thirdly, here's another example, and this is language used in negotiations, in informal negotiations in this case, though we do have a lesson on more formal negotiations as well in level 5. This is in level 4, and this is negotiating sort of, you know, between friends. Right? So we've got making suggestions, asking for clarification, accepting a suggestion, not accepting it, and making a final decision. And I think this can help in 2 ways, giving them this kind of language. Partly it builds confidence that they kind of know what to say, but also it is teaching them how to cooperate well with each other, because they're learning not just the language, but about good ways of accepting or not accepting a suggestion. You know, they're not just saying, no, that's rubbish. All right. You know, they're saying, I can see what you're saying, but, or I don't know if I would fancy that. So they're learning to be tentative and so on. Right? I'm not going to go back in the slides, I think, because it's hard enough to keep them showing, but you will be able to see them afterwards. And last but not least, right, I think we have to be prepared to help students deal with conflict within a group. So, you know, inevitably, when people work together, not just students, not just teenagers, right, there is likely to be some conflict. Because students have to learn how to work with each other. And being able to deal with conflict is a very valuable skill, both at school and, of course, in life and in their careers. So let's talk about that a bit more. Right? I don't know if you've come across Bruce Tuckman's description of how small groups develop. Right, so Bruce Tuckman's a psychologist, and he came up with this paradigm, which I think is quite useful. And he describes how groups develop as they work together. So the first stage that he talks about is forming. So forming is when the group first comes together. They don't feel that confident with each other, so they're likely to be quite polite. They may not, you know, want to say too much. One person may take the lead and make everybody do something, or nobody may want to take the lead. So the forming stage is not terribly productive, really. The next stage is the storming stage, right? And this is what happens when they start to feel more confident and comfortable. And because of that, there is likely to be more conflict at this stage. So they're trying to kind of sort out what the roles are that everybody's taking, what the unspoken rules are. And then the next stage is norming, and that's when they've started to sort those rules and roles out, and people are starting to work together better. But it's very common for teams to keep going back and forth between storming and norming for quite a while. So it isn't really forming, storming, norming, performing. It's more like forming, storming, norming, storming, norming, storming, norming, and then eventually, we hope, performing, because performing is when they really start to get it right and they successfully achieve the goal. So this is just part of the process, and I think we need to not worry about the storming stage, because what Tuckman is saying is that it is necessary to have that in order for the group to learn to work together. So how can we help students, you know, to get through this storming stage in the most effective way? Well, I would say that a key skill that we need to teach them here is active listening. So what's the difference between listening and active listening? Just pop your ideas in the chat box. What do you think the difference is between the two, between listening and active listening? It's active, says Mattel. Yes, okay. Yeah, active, you really pay attention. Listening with interest and attention. Okay, yes, good. All right, full attention. Exactly, all right. Nodding your head, well, maybe, but you could be nodding your head and still not really listening. So most of the time, when most of us are listening to someone else, we're not really giving them our full attention. We might be doing something else at the same time. We might be thinking about what we're going to say next, right? So active listening is where we are giving the person speaking our full attention and really listening. And we can show that through feeding back to them, reflecting back to them what we're hearing. So that's the basis of active listening. So as you hear somebody say something, you check with them that you've understood. You might say, so you're saying that, da, 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 or if I understand you correctly, you think, da, da, da. All right. So yes, you are showing empathy and you're giving them your full attention. So you can help students to practice that. And then the stop is here because it's a nice game that you can use. Once students have the idea of active listening, you get them discussing something as a group, and then every so often you stop the group and you stop somebody mid-sentence, and then you nominate another student who has to continue that sentence. So they have to stay absolutely focused on what's being said, because otherwise they won't be able to continue the next sentence. So it's a really good way of getting students absolutely focused and listening to each other. And it's a lot of fun as well. Okay, so when we've helped students to develop all of these skills, we can of course get them to practice them through teamwork and project work. So this is an example from High Note 1. And this is a life skills lesson which comes after every 2 units in this series, and it's about how to work in a team on school projects. So if you have a look at the life skills box on the second page, you can see that many of the things that we've been talking about are in there. You know, so each team member has different skills, so give each person in the team a different role. So we're talking about the roles within the team, and you can encourage people to try different roles. You know, perhaps their natural inclination is a certain role, but they can try other ones as well. Listen to other people's ideas and opinions. So this is the active listening that we're talking about, right? Explain things to the other people in your team if they don't understand. So this is what we talked about with sort of clarifying and empathy. And then you can see when they've done the life skills project, the final task is to discuss how well you worked as a team, describe any problems you had, and say how you solved them. So whenever you do this kind of teamwork, you can always get them to reflect on how well they worked as a team, and for all of them, but also for themselves individually. And these are the kinds of things that they can then use in university interviews or even in job interviews to give examples of how well they worked in a team. So at the beginning of the webinar, we looked at some inspirational sayings about teams that you often find on the internet. And this is one that somebody actually mentioned. So together, everyone achieves more, spells team. So, you know, these inspiring statements don't necessarily mean much on their own, but if we can gradually build up the students' skills and abilities to work as a team, then this one, I think, is definitely true. You know, together everyone does achieve more. Okay, so thank you, and thank you for bearing with me through certain technical difficulties. Are there any questions? We've got a few minutes, if you like. Hania says, changing roles in the group seems great for students' personal development. Absolutely. You know, I think we need to recognise that we can develop the strengths that we don't have. And, you know, practicing is the way to do it, I would say. Okay, that's great. I'm just looking to see if there's how we can choose projects that catch their attention. Well, I guess we need to think about, you know, what they're interested in. What do you think about the groups? Sorry, this is going so fast, but somebody just asked about whether the teacher chooses the members of the group or the students. I think you can do it both ways. I think it can be helpful for the teacher sometimes to choose the members because then they have to kind of work a little harder maybe at finding their roles within that group. Whereas if they're already a friendship group, they probably already have a way of working together. But I think you can do it both ways, because you'll get perhaps higher motivation if students are working with their friends. How can we make sure that we've picked the right observer, says Borhan? Well, I think there are different ways you can do that. In fact, I didn't mention this, but one of the factors for choosing the observer is if there is somebody who tends to dominate the group, that's a good person to choose as the observer, because then they can't, right? Because they're only allowed to observe. Equally, if there's somebody who's very shy and who finds it difficult to get in what they want to say with the group, making them the observer can give them a very clear role where they get to say something and everybody has to listen. Right, so you can do it both ways. Kayla says about using the apps that help you create groups using random selection. I personally would use a variety of methods for putting groups together. I think sometimes random, sometimes I would select them and I would try to, deliberately put people in a group that I think would take on different roles. And sometimes I think I would let them choose them as well. So Inya asked about other activities to help students deal with conflict. I have actually just written a blog post, which is going to be together on the same website with all the other material from the careers experiences webinars about helping students deal with conflict, where I go into a little bit more detail about that. I'm very sorry if I'm missing lots of questions because it's going very fast. So Seda says some shy students don't want to participate in projects even if we clarified the roles. Well, I think you could make them the observer, but you obviously don't want to do that all of the time, but that can be a good place to start. But I think giving specific roles does help with students who are a bit shy. Also giving them the language that they need can help, because if they're confident that they know what to say, then I think that can help. Okay, Julie's asking about having the PowerPoint presentation. You will have a recording of this. It will be sent to you together. I'm not sure what the title of the blog post will be yet because it hasn't been published yet, Laura, but it will be connected. It will be on the same website. So let me go to the next slide. So this is, if you go to english.com/careers-skills, right, then you will see all the materials that are available, including the relevant blog post. So when it's published, that's where it will be. Some people are asking about certificates. Yes, you will receive a certificate. It will be within 2 weeks of the end of this webinar. Does it work with mixed ability students? Yes, absolutely. I think it's very good for mixed ability students because people can kind of do things at their own level. Oh, thank you. You're not causing any problems, right? But the questions are going very, very fast. That's the only thing. Okay, so if you're having problems with certificates, then try to, so Pearson is responding to you about the certificates. Okay, thank you all very much. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar series. Do go to this website and you'll be able to find the recordings there. There are also lots of other materials for you to use, some training videos for teachers, some training videos for students. There's a handy guide which kind of summarises all of the points in the webinar. Some of these materials are still being put up on the site, but they should be there very soon. I think I just missed a question there. Okay, that's great. So yes, thank you very much. And yeah, very nice to see so many people here. I know this, it's difficult times at the moment, isn't it? But it's great that we can get together like this online. So thank you so much. Okay. Yes, thank you very much for coming.